Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. So hope that everybody's keeping well wherever might be. And was asked a question at our meditation course just yesterday, I think, 2 days ago. And the question was, in terms of the 6 relationships that the Buddha recommends for lay people to have, basically, or lay people to take care of, well, how does one practice those relationships as just like actions, so that one isn't kind of building up a sense of self-identity there, and so that one can practice that way both, so that feeds in basically both off the cushion to when one is on the cushion meditating. So, just a bit of a background, because not everybody watching this, or likely most people watching this, were not at the course. There's a sutta called the Sigalovada Sutta, which I'll plan to link in the description below. And this sutta, the Buddha recommends, or he describes 6 different types of relationships that one should basically take care of. And there's a couple interesting things about these relationships. Maybe I'll just give a little bit of a brief description so that people know, so that we're basically all on the same page, kind of bring people up to speed with that. So these relationships, there's a couple interesting things about them. One of them is that depending on the relationship one is in, one's role changes. So, one has relationships to one's mother and father, to one's teachers, to one's wife, to one's wife or husband, to one's friends, to one's employees, or to one's spiritual teachers, spiritual leaders. So depending on which role one finds oneself in, one's position changes. It can either be a higher or lower position, and one's duties change depending on the position that one is in. So what it means is that oftentimes people go through their life and they take on a role that seems to last a long time. Usually this role in Western cultures is associated with a person's job. So if one is a doctor, one is a lawyer, then people treat one a certain way everywhere one goes on the basis of this job. People have this need to live in a hierarchy and to find out where they exist in the hierarchy. So because of this, one can take on this role of being a doctor, or being a lawyer, or being treated and acting in a particular way across the board to whoever one is interacting with. There's this kind of pride or something that one has accomplished this. When one comes to meditate, then one learns to take these roles like hats. One takes one hat on, one puts one hat on and takes it off, another hat on, takes it off. And these roles are not always related to the success that one gains through one's efforts. A lot of the time they're related to how much, or what in that relationship, what another person has given to one. It's not always that way, but this is one of the strongest determining factors. So, because of this, it's not just the case that if one is a lawyer, one interacts with one's parents like a lawyer, one's teachers like a lawyer. One interacts with one's friends, maybe that'd be the case where one is interacting more like a lawyer, I don't know. It's going to be with one's employees, or one's employer, or vice versa, that one is interacting as a lawyer, interacting as a person with a certain status. In each of these relationships, one's status changes. And one learns to take the hat on, put it off, depending on what relationship one is in. So the second aspect of these relationships is that the interesting thing about them is that they have mutual sets of duties and responsibilities. So these relationships are not just something in which one is a consumer, looking for where it's always going to be like something really great all the time. One also gives. One also gives out of a duty in these relationships. And in return, people give back to one. So it creates this stability that is more present than if one were just looking for a purely consumerist approach to a relationship. What is this always giving me? It's also what one is giving to other people. But having said that, these relationships balance each other so that they have to meet in the center for them to be effective. Human relationships are seen as this meeting place between two parties, each of which have mutual duties and responsibilities. So this is a little bit of a briefing, a catch-up. We were chatting a bit about this at the meditation course. And in terms of the question, how does one relate to these relationships in such a way that one isn't creating a sense of self? Basically, until one becomes an arahant, one will be engaging in activities such that one views oneself and an external object and makes comparisons between them. One views oneself in terms of an identity in a world of experience. So what we see in the Buddhist path is that the Buddha teaches us, and Ajahn Thanissaro has done really excellent work, really excellent writings about this, that basically the Buddhist path is one which kind of self-destructs, it kind of turns in on itself. And so we're trying to get beyond a sense of self. And the root defilement for this is called asmimana. But in order to do that, we learn to take on increasingly skillful senses of self. We learn to self in an increasingly skillful way. So as we were mentioning, this involves in each of these relationships taking on an identity that's appropriate to that relationship and that will make it the most healthy and nourishing relationship in the long run. And that will also give one the best karma. So the supports for happiness for one's mind, if one is a layperson especially, are not going to come exclusively from meditation because one doesn't have the time. If one wants to devote more and more time to meditation, that's a different story. Then one's relationships will become more and more with monks or more with monasteries, more and more with aspects of the sasana, the religion. But if one is living a kind of normal lay life and doing some meditation, these relationships are very important to cultivate well, to gain a kind of peace of mind and to gain a kind of sense of security. Because when they're done with this sense of responsibility and the other person reciprocates, you've got a pretty solid relationship there that can last a lifetime and that can give benefits that are far more than just the immediate pleasures of a consumerist relationship or the immediate pleasures of, say, like, I'm getting this to get a job. There's a sense of happiness that one gets from fulfilling one's responsibilities well, from giving back to the people who've given to one. So this is an aspect of taking on these relationships, taking on a sense of identity within a world of experience. These relationships are a world of experience. Kind of one is with one's parents. That's that's kind of a world of experience right there, almost, you could say, an aspect of a world of experience. And one takes on an identity there skillfully. I'm the child here. This is my duties. These are their duties to me. Are they being fulfilled? Same with one's teachers. Same with one's spouse. Same with one's friends. Same with one's employees or workers. And same with one's spiritual teachers as the top. When one learns to take these hats on and put them off well, not as a matter of this is who I am, I have this status, but as a matter of what's skillful in that situation, that actually helps to undercut this asmimana, this kind of conceit I am to a certain extent. Because this conceit, this asmimana, and its more gross, you could say like outflow, sakkaya ditthi, this conceit is something that people grab onto, they like it, they don't want to give it up because they like the good parts. If one has this good status, one wants to have that status all the time. But when one learns to deliberately take one status and put it on, take it off and put it on according to the situation, that undercuts the desire. That's the foundation of sakkaya ditthi, the foundation of asmimana, that one likes one always wants to be in this identity where one is always in a high position, where good things are always coming to one as a result of that identity. One learns to take on identities through responsibility, through a sense of giving, as well as the identities where one is in a superior position. Those positions have responsibilities that go with them. They're not just something where one is always getting these good benefits, or always getting these consumerist type benefits, sensual pleasure type benefits. So this helps to undercut asmimana. That's one aspect. Also, because these things require a kind of balance, there's mutual duties, mutual responsibilities, and obviously all of us are humans here. When we interact with humans, we know that humans' minds are always changing. Their behaviors are always changing. And so to balance these relationships well, one has to become skilled at interacting with people according to the role that one is in. And what this does, this feeds back into one's meditation, because when one is dealing with the mind can change very quickly. The Buddha said that there's not even a simile, basically, you could come up with to describe how quickly it changes. It's the fastest changing thing that there can be. So to appropriately counter the defilements of the mind requires a skill to be able to balance what the appropriate remedy for the situation is that's occurring in the mind. And this obviously is something that can carry over when one gets skilled at this in finding the appropriate balance in dealing with one's relationships. And also, when one learns to take these hats off and put them on, a lot of the suffering, some of the suffering, the biggest thinking that comes up in one's mind when one's meditating can sometimes be around what people have done to one in the course of the day, or what one thinks one should do for people in each of these 6 relationships. So, when one learns not to take these identities in these relationships so seriously, because one can take them off, put them on, that helps to undercut these worries. And also, when one does these relationships well, then one worries less about them, because they're nourishing relationships. Because one has cultivated them well. One has chosen friends. One has interacted with one's parents in such a way. One has chosen teachers. One has chosen a partner. One has chosen workers. One has chosen spiritual mentors, and such that the relationships are balanced, and that these mutual duties are generally being fulfilled. And human relationships are very complex. It's not like you can really always come up with a checklist, but one can get a sense of the balance in these things, and whether these mutual responsibilities in general are things that are supportive to growth, things that are supportive to long-term happiness. So in these ways, managing these relationships that the Buddha gives in the Sigalovada Sutta well are things that help to undercut asmimana, help to undercut Sakkaya Ditthi and the desire that comes from having this constant good status. They're things that feed back into one's meditation, because when one does them well with a sense of balance, then one learns how to respond to the situations in these relationships appropriately, and that feeds right back into one's meditation. And if these relationships are nourishing things, one worries less about them when one meditates, and one learns to take them less seriously, because one has learned to take these hats on and take these hats off and put them back on when appropriate. So in all these ways, managing one's relationships well, according to the Sigalovada Sutta, is something that brings benefits outside, it's something that helps to undercut Sakkaya Ditthi, and it's something that helps to bring benefits inside when one turns one's mind to meditation, to managing the mind skillfully. So I think leave that for reflection, and wishing everybody all the blessings of Dhamma practice.